Hey everybody, Joe from graybenchelec here. So last week we looked at a cool lot of goodies I got from the estate sale of Jack Brossart, who was the owner and operator of Prescription Electronics. You may know them for the pedal, the Experience, as well as Yard Box and COB or Clean Octave Blend. So obviously Jack Brossart did pass away August of 2019. I was able to, get lucky enough to find some old Prescription Electronics enclosures that weren't drilled out. Contacted the seller. They had a handful of cool stuff in addition to those enclosures, and that included these rows of transistors. And when I saw these, I thought, you know, that looks like they're selected transistors. They're taken out of their original cardboard box that the Soviet transistors used to come in and put into these little foam blocks. It is my guess that these were transistors selected for yard boxes, Prescription Electronics yard boxes. Reason being, the yard box is a 3 transistor Germanium pedal, modeled after the 3-knob tonebender or tonebender Mark III. I've also seen yard boxes in the wild that have Soviet transistors, so we know they were using these transistors or other Soviet transistors for yard boxes when they sort of revived Prescription Electronics, came back in like 2019. So we know they were using transistors at least very similar to those for yard boxes. So I think it's reasonable to assume that's what these were for. It's possible it's a different pedal or some pedal they hadn't released, but probably yard boxes. So anyway, I thought it'd be cool today to take out a couple sets and test them with the Peak Atlas DCA75, which is a simple semiconductor tester that'll give us gain and leakage, true gain, which counts for leakage and leakage by itself. And then we'll take one of those sets and throw it in a tonebender that I've built and have a listen. So I've tested a good number of Soviet transistors, not this part number, I don't believe MP16B, but other part numbers. And in my experience, the Soviet transistors are very consistent. So small range of gains and leakages in like a box, for example. But they do tend to be relatively low gain compared to other like part numbers or other make and model Germanium transistors on average. And we'll probably see that when we test a couple sets here with the Peak Atlas. Also worth mentioning, the DCA75 here tests at a relatively high collector current of 5 milliamps. Compared to other testers out there. So the readings that this will show will be 10-15%-ish higher than other testers. So that's something to consider. That being said, the tonebender, just like all vintage Germaniums, have like recommended gains that you should use. But that's not to say that other gains won't work. And regardless of what we find here, I'm sure that the gains that these will end up being will work fine in the tonebender. Perhaps just a little tweaking to the bias control or whatever. And, you know, we'll be able to prove that when we throw it in the tonebender and have a listen. So let's pull out a couple sets and test them with DCA75 and see where we're at. Actually, just before we do that, I just want to say the last video I mentioned that I was considering selling some of these sets. And I think I am going to do that because there were a handful of people who showed interest. I think that's the right thing to do. I think if I was in Jack's position, you know, hopefully not too soon, but if I was in that position, I would want to see these get built into pedals, not just, you know, sit in a shelf or whatever for some collector or, you know, whatever. I would want to see them built into pedals. And so I think to that end, I am going to separate these out and sell them off as sets. I'm going to sell them, you know, just 3 grouped exactly as they are here. I'm thinking something really affordable. I'm not looking to make a lot of money, maybe like $10 a set, a few bucks for shipping, something like that. Also, we'll probably limit it to like 3 sets per person, just so someone doesn't come and buy them all up. If you're interested in that, I'll once I have the sets ready to sell, I'll put a link in this video or some future video to my reverb store where you'll be able to buy the sets and, you know, keep an eye open for that. All right, let's pull out a couple sets here to test. So I mentioned it in other videos I've done on Germanium transistors, but you want to be careful of the way you handle Germaniums. They are very sensitive to temperature. So we're just going to pull these out with tweezers here. There's one set. We'll do one from the middle. We want to keep these together. Don't want to undo Jack's work. So I'm handling these with tweezers so that my fingers don't warm up the transistors. And yes, even the heat from your fingers can cause readings to drift. All right, so let's test the first one here. DCA75. All right, so first transistor, HFE of 90. and leakage of 61 microamps, which is good readings. Actually pretty decent gain for Soviet transistors, so that's cool. Let's grab another one here. Some of these leads are bent up enough, I'm going to have to do this by hand. So what we'll do is I'll bend them back into shape here, make sure not touching, and then I'll let that one cool off. And this one here, this one's reasonably straight. So we'll grab this up. Test this one. I don't know if they're in any specific order in the foam, so. All right, this one's HFE of 91 and leakage of 62 microamps, so very close to the first transistor. Take that, put it aside, and here's that last transistor. Pop this in. And this one is HFE of 93 and leakage of 126 microamps, which is still reasonable. So a little more evidence there that these are selected transistors, all very close in gain. Leakage was a little high on the third one, but that's not, 126 microamps for a germanium is not unreasonable at all. Let's check a second set here. 90 some HFE for Soviets is actually pretty good. I've tested a lot of these and they can often fall in the 50s, 60s for the vast majority of the transistors. So here's another, here's starting on the second set, HFE of 63 and leakage is 46 microamps. And that is HFE of 97 and leakage of 72 microamps. So a little bit higher on that one compared to the first one. All right, that's an HFE of 75 and leakage of 59 microamps. That's not terrible for a tone bender. You do generally want a little higher gain for your Q2 and Q3. So nothing wrong with that. Let's look at the third set here. But looser gains on that second set. They were very tight for the first set, a little bit wider. It's possible that Jack was just selecting for, just ranges, just it's got to be somewhere between like 60 or 70 and 100. Here's the first of the third set. HFE of 79, leakage of 72 microamps, no problem. Transistor number 2 in the third set. HFE 95, 64 microamps of leakage. All right, here's the third transistor, third set, and that's a gain of 71 and 72 microamps of leakage. All right, so there's 3 sets tested with the DCA 75. The gain's actually surprisingly high. Usually, like I said, Soviet transistors, for my experience, have been more between like 50 and 70. On average, 70 is more the high end. But these had some decent gains in like the 90s and 100s. Of course, like I said, the DCA 75 reads high, relatively high HFE compared to other testers. So, take that with a grain of salt. But what I did like to see is that the gains fell into a range like roughly 70 to 90 some HFE, which is it's on the low side of what you see for tone benders, but it's totally workable and usable and should produce a good sounding fuzz. So let's see if that's true. We'll take a set here and throw them into the one of my tone benders and see what they sound like. All right, so here is one of my tone benders. This is a tone bender Mark III with the tone knob. The set of transistors here I pulled out, I double checked the measurements. This one is so it's like a mid to high 60s in gain, low 70s, and then low 90s for this set. This is a tone bender Mark III, and it has the tone knob just like the yard box, essentially the same circuit. Yard box has a different value bypass capacitor for one of the, I think that for Q2. Some yard boxes have a fourth knob for gain that's like a variable resistor on the output above the volume control. Otherwise, they're essentially the same pedal. Really, all we're doing here is just want to show, number one, that the transistors will work in a tone bender, which I assure you they will. And number two, give a sense of what it might sound like when you do that. So let's go ahead and throw them in here. This is built, I believe this is on a ion board. This does have a voltage regulator in there to create the negative supply for the transistors. So we'll put the 60 something in the Q1 spot, And these, conveniently, these transistors, the MP16B, what's it look like there? Oh, focus, maybe? There we go. MP16B. Conveniently, the pinout is the same as you would expect for like a TO5 package. So that would be collector, base, emitter. Or excuse me, it's upside down. Emitter, base, collector. There we go. Let's pop that in there. The little tab. The tab would be coming off the left corner here, and that indicates the emitter. Put it in there. So, and we'll take the 70 something HFE. We'll put that in Q2. And the 90 something HFE for Q3. So there's 3 transistors stuck in a pedal. You can, for testing purposes, you can leave the leads along like this. That's fine. It's a good idea to cut the leads down when you're actually building a pedal, just because you don't need extra wire in there picking up antennas, especially a relatively high gain circuit like a tonebender. Ion does have a sort of biasing procedure for the pedal here. Just going to fire up the multimeter and do a little bit of that. Already got battery, and this is a fresh battery, so it's about 9.3 volts, I think, is the last time I checked it. Yeah, so you want about 3.5 volts on the first test pad here, which it already is. That's good. And somewhere between 2 and 3 volts on the second test pad, which we're at. So we're going to leave that right there. Settings work. So we're ready now to throw this into an amplifier and see what it sounds like. All right, I got the transistors now with the tonebender flipped over so you can see the controls. So let's have a listen to some of the sounds. This is my clean tone. So I'm playing a Fender Strat, which I finally installed noiseless pickups on, so you're welcome for that. I have a sort of like a Bassman combo, like a 1x12 with a V30. And I'm playing, like I said, a Strat on the neck, the bridge pickup. So that's clean sound. Here is the dirty sound. Yeah, so that is the sound of these transistors. Hopefully I went through a little bit and heard some of the different sounds available. Sounds like germanium fuzz, pretty typical. Not a huge difference between different part numbers, germanium transistors, despite the hype and what people will say. They all pretty much sound fuzzy. That is, or I should say, these are the germanium transistors from Prescription Electronics. So these are MP16Bs, and like I said, I'm going to be selling off sets of these, $10 a pop. Plus a couple bucks for shipping, and I'll put them in my reverb store. And if you're interested, it's going to be a max 3 per person, just so you can spread the love and whatnot. But yeah, if you're interested, go check them out. If the link isn't available immediately, it'll be available pretty soon. So just check back for the description, and I'll probably post an Instagram thingy, whatever, just saying that they're available. So yeah, I'm Joe from Graybench Electronics. Thanks for watching.